Hello again, class. This is Tina right here for Week 4, Crisis Leadership Approaches and Competency, prepared for MPA 520, Leadership and Management, and led by Dr. Telleria. As a quick reminder, my crisis scenario is an active shooter on campus. Given the unfortunate news lately of the tragedy in Texas, I wanted to provide a little bit of kind of a PSA here on training. The FBI has put out a wonderful training video called Run, Hide, Fight. The YouTube link is provided for you here. It reminds us, in order to stay safe in an active shooter response or crisis, to run if you have opportunity in a clear pathway, hide if you can find a viable place to hide, and to fight if you have no other option. So if you have a chance, check out the video. Secondly, in the video, they describe some statistics on active shooter scenarios in which most attacks are over within the first 5 minutes, and 35% of those end within the first 3 minutes. However, aftermath from these situations can last several months. Not only do you have to deal with victims and their healing, we have mental health situations, we also have policy changes that may take place and may continue for months after the occasion. For my scenario, the affected community is a college campus with a population of 1,500. It is located in a small city called Lacombe, Louisiana, and that has a population of 7,200. The campus is adjacent to a popular commuter highway, and so local commuters may also be affected if there are shutdowns to that highway. However, the population is undetermined at this time. Additional agencies that may be affected are local, state, and federal police, local health care facilities, and mental health facilities, businesses located along the Highway 434 business route, and the bigger picture, we may see changes to national policy regarding social media regulation and gun control. The areas on the timeline that I have chosen to discuss are the 3-second, 3-minute, and 3-hour marks. My timeline changed from my original presentation as I have discovered through the recent crisis that often the steps in the scenario move much faster than I had originally supposed. And so I have altered, I originally did not have a 3-second mark, and I had a 3-week mark. And so I'm shortening my timeline for the purposes of this presentation. I also wanted to point out before getting into my time frames that I found that while evaluating leadership, I examined that in each one of these particular leadership areas, I found that power and leadership applied to each time frame. So I had selected The Fragile Balance of Power and Leadership by Angela Jones and Sherry York. In this journal, the authors discuss the relationship between the 5 power bases: reward, coercive, legitimate, referent, and expert power, and the effectiveness of a leader. As a quick summary, reward power is associated with reward that can be effective if the rewards are properly associated with performance. However, success can be short-term. Coercive power is associated with the ability to punish, and it is often negative and also short-term. Legitimate power is associated with a person's leadership position. Success is initially anticipated, and resistance can be created among employees if abuse of the position is demonstrated. And referent power exists when followers have a desire to be near a leader, and as a result, the power that they exert. This power association develops out of admiration from the follower and the leader, and it often is unquestioned and followers comply very easily. Expert power depends on the leader's knowledge, skills, and abilities, and is dependent upon the follower's belief that the leader has these abilities. I had also made mention of the leadership styles from Chapter 2 in the Van Wert text on each of my time frame slides, and I felt identified with the leader I had chosen to discuss. So that's my introduction. Let's get started. So at the 3-second time frame point, I have selected coercive power and strategic implementation. The additional references I selected are the Jones and York article previously discussed in my introduction and strategic implementation as a core competency by Pryor et al. This article is a study on the leader competency of strategic implementation rather than concentrating on strategic planning. The authors discuss the ability to effectively execute the 5 P's of paradigm of purpose, principles, process, people, and performance. Implementation has been placed on the back burner for a while because of the difficulties of leaders' ability to properly define and communicate the 5 P's of the paradigm. However, their experience is that with strategic implementation development as a core competency, we will see better execution of an organizational strategic plans. Excuse me. At the 3-second mark, I have decided to discuss the possible controversial leader. I have selected the assailant or gunman. They are an autocratic and coercive leader who is able to strategically implement their plan or goal due to the simplicity of the group, 1 or 2 members. They are able to execute the plan effectively because they lack some of the common troubles other leaders face in implementation. However, the style and approach of this leader is only short-term, and the leader will be overthrown by unwilling followers. At the 3-minute time frame, I have selected to discuss the leadership role of the security officer. I selected the approach from chapters 7 and 8 are complexity and competency enhancement through simulation training. My journal source on complexity by Yolbian, Complexity and the COVID-19 Leadership and Followership in a Complex World, is an article on the business response during the recent pandemic and the strength displayed by adaptive organizations. The organizations that thought outside the box and responded well to the complexities of the changing society were able to weather the pandemic and were seen as successful, while organizations that were more rigid were seen as unsuccessful and unable to adapt. The second article by Yusko and Goldstein, Selecting and Developing Crisis Leaders Using Competency-Based Simulations, is a study creating a core list of specific competencies that you want a specific employee to have, and creating simulations to help leaders develop them. Often these employees are not traditional leadership positions, so training helps develop the competencies in these employees and improve their leadership skills and improve stronger skills for them that are required during crisis. Again, at the 3-minute mark, I have chosen to examine the security guard as a leader. They are a directive leader with legitimate power, and they are used to make decisions based on a continually changing environment. The security guard may need to think quickly and to ensure follower safety and to exert control over the situation. In this way, they are going to be the captain steering our ship. They may be working to get victim to safety. They may be mobilizing local police teams. They may be directing crowds or reporting to the campus administration. So through all of these particular competencies, they need to develop leadership skills through simulations, and so that's where these traits are developed, and they're able to react to these ever-changing situations. At the 3-hour time frame, the immediate danger has passed and the investigation and community response is prepared For this time, I have selected a group of leaders to discuss, including campus personnel, witnesses, and the police. I have chosen the topics from chapters 7 and 8 of shared leadership and communication competency. The article I chose for shared leadership, The Dynamics of Shared Leadership, Building Trust and Enhancing Performance by Drescher et al., expands on the relationship between members of groups and the need to share leadership roles as required by the goal being obtained. Group members must be able to have mutual trust in each other and share leadership roles depending on their expertise or experience in any given situation to obtain the desired outcome. The second article, Leadership in Times of Crisis by Alkany, is a summary of the knowledge gained from a medical crisis in Saudi Arabia on the key competencies required of leaders to deal with the crisis at hand. The competencies detailed include taking action, creative thinking, conveying clear messages, and building confidence. And all of these particular competencies can be displayed to internal and external parties through effective communication. So I have chosen communication as my primary competency to discuss from this article. Our leadership style at the 3-hour mark is therefore participatory and collaborative. The power base exhibited is expert power. Our leaders will be concerned with gathering information on the incident and placing various persons from campus personnel, police investigators, and witnesses together to gather information. At the different stages, each of these groups will bring expertise to the table and have to share leadership roles to accomplish gathering information to determine the motivations behind the incident, the ability of the incident to occur, and the termination of the threat. Each of these groups must be able to trust members and provide feedback so that the proper information is relayed to the community on the crisis, the assailant, the victims, and the campus. Because these groups are working together and sharing leadership roles, all members must have communication skills as a fundamental competency. At the 3-day time frame, the campus will be working to determine the best way to continue operations. Investigations will still be ongoing, and the health and welfare of victims and witnesses will be addressed. But this is where my previous time frame and current events have caused me to change a difference in my thinking at this time frame. Even now, at the 3-day time frame, we begin to see community response. As a result, I have chosen the leadership topics covered in chapters 7 and 8 of social change model and sense-making competency. The additional journal article I have selected to expand on my understanding of the social change model is Leadership in Social Work Education and the Social Change Model of Leadership. In this study by Lacini et al., the authors conduct a study that included 39 graduate students on their experiment in social change and how they observe leadership roles. The experiment, the students were asked to report on the core concepts of social change, the individual values, the group values, and the society values. And through the discussions and the experimentation with the social change theory, the students found that they had a deeper understanding of group dynamics, in particular the relationship between the challenges and the benefits of collaborative efforts, and that students largely embrace the traits exhibited in the social leadership model. The second journal article I chose for this time frame was a study on the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic and competencies displayed by leaders. During a crisis, leaders must display competencies in communication, connectivity, courage, credibility, decisiveness, emotional effectiveness, integrative thinking or sense-making, and situational awareness and team leadership. This study was done by Wicker on the perspectives in HRD competency-based approach to developing leaders for crises. And I chose to concentrate on the idea of integrative thinking or sense-making as it applies to the active shooter crisis. The leader I have chosen for this time frame is a social change driver. This leader works to gain knowledge of the situation and therefore gains expert power. The leader appeals to followers by calling for change to lessen the chance of reoccurrence of the crisis. We will see community groups take on this role in attempting to educate others, with the outcome being the ability to change policy. Some policy may be limited to the site, such as changes to campus practices or policies, and other policy changes may be more far-reaching, like state or local or federal changes. We may see changes to gun control, or we may see changes to privacy rights and social media. In order to be effective, our leader must embrace social change leadership, in particular the group values and societal values, to enact change. They must also be able to utilize integrative thinking or sense making of the crisis to be able to correctly identifying the underlying causes of the crisis. Was it truly gun control, or was it turning a blind eye to warnings on social media, or could it have been an issue with mental health care? The problem that must be addressed may be all three of these, but we must determine which will benefit the most and provide the most effective solutions. Thank you again for listening. I've provided a quick summary of the topics that I've discussed: leadership styles of autocratic, directive, and participatory collaborative. The leadership approaches focusing on influence, being power, complexity, shared leadership, and social change, and competencies of strategic implementation, directive competencies through simulation training, communication, and sense making. Have a great evening, and I look forward to viewing your presentations.